The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Senator Lynwood Lewis with us today. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, you are a relatively new member of the Senate. What are some of the differences, and how do you like being in the Senate versus the House of Delegates?
Well, this is actually my 11th session, but you're right. This is only my first full session as a member of the Senate. I had a partial session last year after the special election and took over for Senator Northam's seat. You would think that it would be there wouldn't be as many differences, but there are actually a lot of differences, customs, traditions, procedures that are different in the Senate. So it's taken some getting used to, but by and large, it's a good environment, and I enjoy it. There's still a lot of collegiality in the Senate, and that's helpful.
Now, to what extent do your committee assignments have they changed since you were in the House of Delegates?
Yes, they have, except for the Ag Committee, which I was very pleased to continue service on the Senate Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources Committee. Having served on the House Ag Committee for a number of years, it's important to the district, and I'm familiar with a lot of the subject areas. Other than that, it's a completely new set of committees. I've got Health and Education, which I'm actually very pleased to be on because of obviously the importance of the subject matter embraced by the committee, and also Local Government, which is also an important committee, so pleased to be on that as well.
Well, tell us how important agriculture is in your district.
Well, it's hugely important to the district. Obviously, the two counties on Virginia's Eastern Shore are huge agricultural producers. Depending upon what crop and what given year, we're probably in the top 1, 2, or 3 any given year. And of course, agriculture is a huge part of Virginia's economy. And also, the Ag Committee, in addition to particularly agricultural issues, it embraces a whole host of regulatory issues that are important as well, and also Chesapeake Bay issues, which are hugely important to the 6th Senate District.
Talk to us a little bit more about the geography of your district and your constituents.
It is an expansive and diverse district, both geographically and by the demographics. It starts up at the Maryland line on Virginia's Eastern Shore in Accomack County, goes down the Eastern Shore, Accomack, Northampton, goes over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, one precinct in Virginia Beach as soon as you get off the bridge tunnel, and then we go over to take in about half the city of Norfolk, and then we go over to the Middle Peninsula and take in Matthews County.
So when you want to reach out to constituents, you have a lot of windshield time, I take it.
Indeed. I have cheated a little bit on visits to Matthews by flying a few times. It's about a 15 or 20-minute flight versus a 3-hour drive. But it's a challenge to get around the width and breadth of the district, yes.
Of course, the other interesting thing about your district is that it includes Wallops Island.
Absolutely, and Wallops, Woody, is a huge part of, I think, what the governor calls our Virginia's new economy, as we seek to get away from a lot of defense spending dollars and look to ways to broaden our economic activity. Certainly commercial space flight, I think, is going to be a crucial part of that. There are some exciting things going on there. In addition to the unmanned aerial vehicles, we're one of 5 designated test sites in the country, and those test flights and testing, that's all going to take place at Wallops Island. So, and the Navy has a large presence there as well, so it's quite a facility up there.
Now, to what extent has your district been affected by the things that go on in Washington? For example, the budget cuts, which have been borne heavily by the defense industry, and sequestration.
Absolutely. Sequestration has been a huge impediment to the rebound, or to a rebound in Hampton Roads economy, as well as Northern Virginia. But I think even more particularly and acutely in Hampton Roads. And while we've had some really encouraging economic figures across the Commonwealth and in Hampton Roads in the last 2 or 3 months as we've gone through this budget crisis, the end of this budget crisis, we face a new round beginning with the new federal fiscal year, October 1st, of additional sequestration cuts. We can all hope that Congress gets its act together and can overcome the dysfunction there and do the responsible thing when it comes to these budgetary issues, but I think we have to plan for the worst. So if we get another round of sequestration, that's going to pose additional challenges to us.
What about tourism in your district? Is that a growing industry?
Yes, tourism, again, is another huge part of the district's economy, and again, an important part of the Commonwealth's economy. We have obviously a very vibrant tourism on Virginia's eastern shore. Norfolk is a tourist destination now for many folks. And then you've got Matthews County, which is a terrific and very charming spot that many people like to visit.
Now, what about community colleges and universities in your district?
We have a community college, a very vibrant community college system throughout the district, and very important to us in the district. I'm pleased that this budget includes money for a new Eastern Shore Community College facility, about a $25 million facility on Virginia's Eastern Shore, which is going to be important for workforce training, and also as we look to the expansion of activity at Wallops, I think it's going to be an important part of that expansion as well.
Now, you've worked for a number of years on redistricting issues. As a matter of fact, there's a group, One Virginia 2021, I believe, that you've been working with. Talk to us about the importance of that issue and the pros and cons.
I really believe it is one of the most important issues facing our nation and our Commonwealth. If you look across the Potomac at its huge dysfunction in Washington, the inability to address important issues and get things done, sequestration as a prime example of the results of that dysfunction. We have to avoid that in Virginia. And the way to avoid that, I think, is nonpartisan redistricting. I had a bill, Senate Bill 1000 this year, which got great bipartisan support on the Senate side and met its fate in a subcommittee at 7 a.m. on the House side, which would have adopted the Iowa model for nonpartisan redistricting and put the drawing of legislative maps with our legislative services, a great organization, nonpartisan, career folks who would have drawn these maps according to federal and constitutional requirements, but without regard to political information and data, so that we would have had better districts drawn.
Why is there so much resistance to this concept?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is human nature. Those that have power are reluctant to give it up. But I really think if folks step back, and frankly, I have no idea what it would do to my district if we did adopt this system. I have no idea. But I just think, and apparently the bipartisan group in the Senate that passed this bill, and other redistricting bills like it, really has no idea either. But they view it as such an important fundamental problem with our system that we just have to take that step, regardless of the consequences to our own political party, our own political careers.
There's a V3 program for veterans, Virginia Values Veterans. I know you have a grant program through some legislation.
Very pleased to work with Toddy Puller, Senator Puller, who has been a real champion for veterans issues. She and I co-patroned a bill to establish a grant program for veterans, for recently discharged veterans. Unacceptably high rate of unemployment among our veterans, particularly our more recently discharged veterans. This would build upon the existing V3 program, Virginia Values Veterans, it would both incentivize employers to join the V3 program and also give them incentives to hire veterans. A $1,000 grant per veteran for companies 300 employees or less, up to 10 employees per company. And very excited about that. The House adopted it in its budget, and we also worked with Senator Bryce Reeves, who is another tremendous advocate for veterans issues, and Senator Walter Stosh, who is Chairman of Finance. All of us had bills very similar, and they were all rolled into Senator Puller's bill and my bill, Senate Bill 950. And so it looks like one way or another, whether it's through the budget or through this piece of legislation, that this grant program is going to be a reality.
Who are some of the employers in your district who would be able to take advantage of this legislation?
There are a number of them, because it's all geared towards smaller employers, 300 employees or less. So there are a number of employers throughout this district. And of course, Senate District 6 is a large, with Hampton Roads, a large part of Hampton Roads, a large veteran contingent there. So there are a lot of residents in the district, I think, that would benefit greatly from this program.
Now, in terms of our returning veterans, talk to us about the importance of the community college system.
Oh, and again, the community college system is invaluable to us on a number of fronts in workforce training and retraining. And so these veterans, it offers the veterans a tremendous vehicle by which they can retrain, get additional training. I put in a bill a couple of years ago that directed the State Council for Higher Education to develop a set of criteria by which they can evaluate how to give veterans credit for some of the skills and some of the training that they have during their service to our country. And so I think that's important going forward too.
So in other words, if I'm a medic in Afghanistan and I return here, I'm able to get credit for that training and experience?
Chev was to have developed and has developed criteria by which you can obtain credit for that service, for that training and that knowledge that you gained during your military service.
And for youngsters interested in getting further education out of high school and potentially in our institutions of higher learning, community colleges 2+2 program plays a great role in that.
Oh, absolutely. It is a real gateway, particularly in some of our underprivileged areas, economically challenged areas, rural areas. It provides a real gateway for our young people to go to four-year institutions elsewhere. So we have a great system of higher ed here, public higher ed in the Commonwealth. Real issues and concerns about accessibility because of tuition increases, and that's something once we emerge fully from this great recession and our revenues improve, we're going to have to take a look at our commitment to our institutions of higher education because of the fact that tuition increases, which are done because we don't actively or accurately fund these higher institutions, are posing some real impediments to our middle-income folks and lower middle-income folks to get their kids into these institutions.
And I think there's some legislation pending to mitigate the impact of higher tuition rates. I think the majority leader in the House, Kirk Cox, has a bill that would cap fees, especially in terms of intercollegiate athletics.
Right, right. And that's been worked out. There was some real concern, particularly with Old Dominion University, which I represent, with the impact of that. But they have worked with Kirk, with Delegate Cox, and I think they've worked out a solution to compromise on that.
And there was another bill, I believe, that would allow for a flat fee, a student who wanted to complete his or her education within 4 years.
Right, yeah.
Now, for those students who don't need a college degree, however, those community colleges allow them to get a certificate, for example, training in a trade.
All sorts of technical training. We have probably focused too much on the four-year degree over the years, and to the detriment of vocational and technical training. And so I think there's been a renewed emphasis or interest in the technical and vocational training, both at the high school level and also through our community colleges.
Now, what about K through 12? I understand K through 12 is going to be held harmless.
Yes.
However, that's based upon 2009 funding levels.
Right. Yeah, hold harmless is a relative term, but it's better than the alternative. And so we were pleased. That was the commitment that Governor McAuliffe made. It's a commitment I think the Assembly has honored in this budget, again, in a relative fashion. That's another thing that we really have to look at when we emerge from this recession. Hopefully the end of this recession, because our funding of standards of quality, the state has not been a reliable partner to localities in funding of standards of quality funding. One thing I've been very intent on this year is SOL reforms.
Yes.
And we have had we made some good steps last year. We are in the final stages of figuring out what final steps we're going to take this year. I was co-patron with Senator Miller, John Miller, on a bill to dramatically reduce the number of SOL tests. In fact, get it back to essentially where it was when we started the SOL testing program. That bill on the Senate side did not meet with success, did not emerge from the committee, but we've also worked, co-patroned a bill with Senator Cosgrove from Chesapeake, which I think is an important bill about expedited retesting. Retesting is an important part of SOL reforms as well. So when this session is over with, I hope we're going to be able to point to a number of pieces of legislation that are going to result in more SOL reforms. It is a real impediment to good teaching and to quality learning, and I think there's a bipartisan consensus now that we really need some significant reforms on SOLs.
What about, there was some legislation last year that some people thought had unintended consequences, for example, grading school districts on an A to F scale.
Right.
And then there was another piece of legislation that I think is dead now as a result of court action, which would have allowed the state to take over a failing school district.
The super school district, which would have essentially been, as you indicate, Richmond, taking over a failing school system. That was a bad idea, and I think we all realized, even the folks who had initially been proponents of it, that it was a bad idea. It was never funded, and then subsequent to that, the Circuit Court in the city of Norfolk actually found that it was not constitutional. The A through F funding this year has finally been put to bed, and again, that was a bad idea with a lot of unintended consequences as to branding these schools as failing. And what would result, practically speaking, from that brand was not a good thing. So we need to work with these schools and not punish them. It's not all money. A lot of it is money, but it's not all money. SOL reforms, again, is a big step, I think, to helping these folks in these school systems.
What about the so-called Tim Tebow bill that would allow homeschool students to participate in high school athletics?
Right. That is always a tough issue. It's been a perennial issue for a number of years here in the General Assembly. I do not support the Tebow bill. And again, it's a tough issue, and I understand the frustration these families face. I appreciate and support their right to homeschool. But it's also like private schools. There are a number of small private schools across our Commonwealth that don't have the programs, sports programs, that our public schools have and that are funded by the taxpayer dollars. But folks make choices. And the students, it's difficult to hold those students to the same standards for eligibility and disciplinary standards and all the other standards that our public school students have to meet and maintain in order to participate in these programs. So while it's a tough issue, I think it's the right call.
Automobile traffic congestion is a huge issue in part of your district,
Right.
and I know you have some legislation dealing with the height of trucks.
Right. I had some pre-session meetings regarding the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. It was a huge issue for a large part of my constituency, which is right there when you come off of the tunnel, and found out overheight trucks are a large part, or not insignificant part, of the problem there because of the turnarounds that have to be performed when an overheight truck tries to get through the tunnel. So what I have done is tried to think outside the box. Delegate Odor started this a few years ago with a very hefty fine, but the fine just either wasn't being imposed or wasn't an adequate deterrent. So what we now do with this bill is offer, which passed the House yesterday, so it's on its way to the governor's desk, is offer the driver a choice. He can stay there, a driver of an overheight vehicle, he can stay there until the VDOT employee tells him that traffic conditions are appropriate for him to make the turn without causing a serious traffic hazard. Or he can elect to go on his way and be turned around, but in which case a summons will be issued for him, and he'll have to go to court and deal with that. So hopefully that provides some incentive for the driver to cooperate and stay there.
I understand you were working with your firefighters in Norfolk on a workers' compensation matter?
Right. There was some issues with workers' comp, particularly with colorectal cancer, colorectal cancer that we wanted to deal. And unfortunately, Commerce and Labor thought that was an expansion of the workers' comp coverage. I think the firefighters were right. I think it is a fair adjustment to the workers' comp legislation, and we'll make another run at it last year. Delegate Scott Linghamfelter had a companion bill on the House side, and his bill, I think, is still alive but in appropriations, so we won't know what's going to happen with that until the final days of the session.
I know you had a number of town hall meetings before the General Assembly went into session. What kinds of things were you hearing from your constituents?
Well, it's a diverse district, but I can tell you one thing that we hear about constantly in Norfolk is sea level rise. And I had a bill in to create the Coastal Resiliency Fund, and actually that's going to be in front of House Agriculture here in the next few days. It passed the Senate with strong bipartisan support, and it would create a fund that would provide for low interest loans for homeowners and businesses in the Tidewater area, and to enable them to do some flooding mitigation and to deal with flooding issues on their particular properties. There's no money attached to it this year. It's the structure of the fund. But it's important to send a message to businesses that are in the district and that are thinking about locating there that we recognize the seriousness of this problem and we're going to be dealing with it. And also the Department of Defense needs to hear that message too. Virginia has come somewhat late to the game in dealing with flooding issues, and we really have to show that we are serious about it. And so Delegate Stiley, I'm on the Recurrent Flooding Study Committee, chaired by Senator Locke and Delegate Stiley. And this was one of the recommendations that I was pleased to carry from our study committee, was the creation of this fund. And Delegate Stiley is co-patroned it as the House co-patron. So we'll see how that proceeds. I was disappointed. I had a study bill in that actually passed the Senate that would have, or well, almost passed the Senate. It actually got defeated at the last minute. It needed a 2/3 majority on the floor and only got a majority. That would have studied, had our Department of Environmental Quality study our participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, just to find out if it perhaps offered a means by which we could achieve some funding for this huge obligation that we have in the Tidewater area to deal with this flooding issue. And specifically tasked them with looking at the advantages and disadvantages, and also the effects of the participation they've had in the 8 or 9 other states that are part of it. But that bill did not make it out of the Senate, so we'll probably try again next year with that.
Now, what about the aquifer that provides fresh water to Matthews?
Yes, there is a significant issue there, and the fracking issue is in the town hall that I had in Matthews. That was a very big topic of discussion. Folks are concerned about the potential impact of fracking on the quality and the integrity of their aquifer and the quality of the water from it. So going forward, we have to be sure fracking is becoming a larger part of life everywhere, because we're finding new reserves that we never knew we could access before. So we need to be careful, and we need to make sure we have an adequate understanding of what we're doing, and also a robust regulatory scheme from DEQ as to how do we go about that.
So that flooding issue also has an impact on the tunnels in the Hampton Roads area, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And Norfolk in particular, and other areas of Hampton Roads as well, have the double problem of sea level rise and recurrent flooding, but also subsidence, the sinking issue. And so those two combine for a sort of a perfect storm for flooding issues.
Now, what about the Port of Virginia? How critical is that to the economic vitality of the Commonwealth?
Absolutely critical, and the governor has focused on that, again, as part of his new Virginia economy, to constantly work to expand the port, to do more to promote the port, to make it a larger engine for our economy in Hampton Roads and the whole Commonwealth. We have the Port of Hampton Roads, we have the inland port, so there are a lot of components to it. But he is really working hard to reconstitute the board. The numbers have improved greatly under Mr. Reinhardt, who's the new director of the port, and he's doing a fantastic job, has a fantastic career and experience behind him. So it's big. We have some real congestion issues there at the port, and we have to figure out a way going forward, probably next year, to figure out how we're going to set about dealing with those congestion issues, because in the shipping business, congestion issues can be a death knell. So we're going to work on those things going forward.
And those congestion issues are likely to increase, are they not? Because the port is the only port in the Eastern Shore right now that will be able to handle those post-Panamax ships.
Absolutely, and we're counting on that. And so we have to be prepared to deal with what we hope will be an increased volume from that. By dealing with these congestion issues. That's why the transportation issue that we addressed a couple years ago was so important as well, because if you can't get goods and services from point A to point B in a reliable, efficient fashion, you're going to be at a severe competitive disadvantage.
And of course, mitigation of congestion is one of the criteria that's going to be used to determine what gets funded. Economic development for rural areas like yours as well, and more importantly, I guess, the state now has to look real close at the return on investment. Yeah,
all those things. We've got a new system for evaluating these projects, which I think is prudent and a good way to go, because people have a right to expect that their tax dollars are being spent in an appropriate and efficient and effective fashion. So I think we've done some good things in transportation in the last couple of years. These large projects in Hampton Roads, which are so expensive because of the water obstacles that we have to deal with, I think we're on track to really getting them jump-started. The frustrating thing about transportation is if you start yesterday, it's still a long process.
What about the continued use of public-private partnerships?
Obviously, we've had some bad experiences with public-private partnerships, particularly with the Downtown Midtown Tunnel, the Elizabeth River Crossings project. But it is an inevitable part of our ability to deal with these large transportation projects. We are not going to be able to do all these projects that we absolutely must do without this public-private partnership, or P3 process. The governor's made some reforms to it. Chris Jones, Delegate Jones, carried a bill which made some significant reforms to it, necessary, needed reforms, and that's going to become law, and that's good. And hopefully that will help us avoid any future bad deals. And sometimes a bad deal is just that, a bad deal, and that's what we found with the Elizabeth River Crossings project.
Yeah, and I understand as a result of that bad deal that the state, because of the outcry, had to buy down some of the tolls.
Governor McAuliffe promised during the election and made good on his promise after he was elected that he would buy down those tolls, and he did, but that was for a limited period of time. And so now we're forced to figure out a way to deal with this bad deal, and hopefully we can find a way to further reduce those tolls, whether we renegotiate the contract, whether we find additional state funds to do it, because it is a real unfair burden on the folks in Norfolk and Portsmouth that have to navigate those thoroughfares.
We've got about 2 minutes left, but I wanted you to give our viewers, from your point of view, the pros and cons of ethics reform and what's likely to happen here.
Yeah, we passed a bill which Senator Norman, who was the patron of the bill, said on the floor is still a work in progress. The final result has not been seen. It'll be worked out in conference between the House and the Senate. We've greatly reduced the gift ban. When we talk about gifts, we usually talk about meals valued at $50 or more. Many of us are of the opinion that it's really at the point now where we probably ought to just have a complete gift ban. Mm-hmm. It just makes it easier for everybody to understand the rules and alleviates the system of reporting for the people who provide the meals and what have you. So it's probably just easier to have a bright line rule. Whether that'll be the final product or not, I don't know. People have a right to expect of transparency in government. Public trust is hard won, easily lost, and doubly difficult to regain, and we're in a regain status now because of the unfortunate incidents involving Governor McDonnell. And public perception is important, and the public has a right to, as I said, to transparency and a right to certain expectations from their elected officials, and I think we're going to try and give them that with this final package, whatever it looks like.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Senator Lynwood Lewis.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.